people who are starting to drop out of the traditional education system end up kind of dropping into this global learning community of people who are contributing in creating educational resources, meeting other people, supporting other people, and just kind of collaborating to create a more diverse, rich educational experience. We're just talking about how we can use that to enhance young people's education, as well as like kind of what are all the ways that we can not only contribute to the global school, but how the global school can contribute and I guess helping us.
Yesterday, I shared this question about the role of dads. And I feel like with something like that, you have to be careful. Anytime that you even hint at gender identity, all kinds of problems come. So at the forefront, I just want to make really clear that, at least in my opinion, for any individual, the role of the dad is just the role of the human and whatever they choose to be. I don't really think that gender defines anybody. At the same time, I think it's really hard to ignore the fact that there are differences. I mean, there's obvious biological differences between men and women. So why wouldn't there also be psychological tendencies that, at least on the average, if you look at the whole group, tend toward certain behaviors that might lend themselves toward a certain way of approaching parenting and education, and being aware of that, I think is important. I think it's really interesting to look at how that particular set of traits, and we can talk about those if we want to, but how those align with the shift in the changing workforce. So here's a few things that I know to be true, just statistics, is that on average, the number of male teachers in K through 12 is certainly a minority and has been falling recently. Also, men are they're actually struggling to get into and pass college, as well as girls. Girls seem to their brains appear to mature faster than boys, and that kind of seems to coincide too with the physical maturity, where or you'll see this a lot with girls and boys siblings, where the girl will hit puberty sooner and start growing taller. And so there's a lot to unpack with some of that, but I think I just want to open it up to have everybody just share in their own words, kind of when they think of dad in the position of educator, what is that? What are the things that come to your mind? What do you think are the most interesting aspects of that question? And then we can dive deeper into that. And feel free to share, stories from your own life too. I might also bring up some anecdotes that I'm getting from responses on these other platforms. What do you think, guys?
I was just gonna say, this is Aquinas. I'm not a dad, but um,
You had a dad though at some point, I'm guessing.
no, but I also was gonna say, like, I got to actually have real influence in the upbringing of a girl who was the daughter of my last girlfriend and who's still one of my closest friends. So Kayla, I've been in her life for the last 32, 17 years. She's 22 now. And so I got to have a lot of input with her upbringing while I was together with her mom. And then even as we separated, her mom was in alignment with my views about raising kids and how to interact with them. So as far as dad's role, again, I wasn't a dad. What would be unique that dad might kind of do a little different from mom in education? I'm not really sure. Um, I guess the circumstances would matter, but maybe to Joe's point, there are some general differences. I don't know if you want to call it kind of psychological between men and women. Again, general. There's obviously exceptions. So I guess I'm saying I'd like to hear more of the dads who are actually doing some of that education, what their views might be.
Yeah,
Well,
if at all. And so the role and this is very much like kind of the way that I grew up. Like my dad was just working. And so he spent a lot of time, certainly supporting my stepmom at the time. And then the kinds of things that he would do with me were well more on the weekend. You know, we would play some video game that we would really like. Like we played a lot of Civilization, this video game Civilization. And at the time, I didn't realize how much I was learning, but I actually learned a ton. We usually played on the Earth map, and so I had a very detailed understanding of the global geography because it wasn't just the silhouette of the oceans and the land masses, but it was also all the topography and like the mountain ranges and the rivers. And he would like talk to me about it, be like, "Oh, that's the Mississippi River there," you know, and I would be like, "Oh, really?" You know. And so I was learning things, but it wasn't like in a very structured way. Now, that's just one group though. Then there's a whole other group of the dads that are like, "I'm a homeschool dad," or "I'm the primary educator." And it's interesting because they won't write very much. They'll just plant their flag in the ground just to say, "Hey, we exist. We're out here," you know, and not really answer the question. They're almost looking at the question as binary, like instead of saying, you know, what is dad's role in education? They'll look at that and almost think that maybe they don't see that it's a guy posting it. I'm not sure because a lot of these groups are actually called like homeschool mom to mom or mom talk about education or you know mommy's talking about parenting or like something that implies that it's like moms only, right? So I start a homeschool dads group explicitly just trying to give a space for dads to communicate because the way that these dads are reading it, a bunch of them is what is dad's role in education, almost sassy, like you know what's the point, like what is he trying to do here? And so once they find out that I'm a homeschool dad, or at least I work from home, so I can spend a ton of time educating my kids and just being with them, well, then they'll open right up. They'll get on the phone with me and they will share all of these amazing things that they're doing. And by amazing, I mean that they're amazed by it. Not that it's better or worse, but it seems to lend itself less towards curriculum and kind of more standard structure. Here, let's go through the process in a lot more adventure, more rough and tumble play, more things that you know maybe well the kinds of things that might get my grandmother worried basically like so one of these guys was sharing me a private video of him teaching his 4-year-old daughter how to shoot a shotgun. And he's just sitting there with a beer, like kicked back, like great guy, by the way. This guy, like highly educated, professional. You know, I saw nothing wrong with this at all. He was right there, and just laid back on a lawn chair, you know, showing like here's how you do it, organizing everything, right? But it's the kind of thing that my grandmother would have yelled out the back door at my grandfather when he would have a bunch of us kids in the back of like basically it was like a trailer behind a tractor, and he'd have all of us kids hopping in the back of it to try to stomp down the leaves. And we'd be all jumping up and down on this tractor while the tractor's driving around this huge yard at like 15 miles an hour. You know, and she would yell out the back door, "Raymond, make sure those kids don't get hurt," you know. And he would kind of nod, and you know he had a pipe and a big hat and a camcorder that was like the kind that would sit on your shoulder, and you know we had a great time with this. I mean, he would take us out fishing, and you know I was telling a story yesterday with a bunch of these homeschoolers at a meetup about how we caught a turtle while we were actually trying to catch catfish, and he had a couple of us kids hold the turtle up on the side of the barn while he drove a giant nail through its head. And we had turtle soup that night. I learned how to make turtle soup. You know, it's stories like that that I just don't, you know, I haven't seen a lot of, for example, homeschool moms that are hopping on here sharing stories to one of my questions that have that feel. And it just got me thinking, man, it seems like dads, there are some differences here. So that's some of what I was seeing mixed in with my own, uh, you know, some of my own observations and my own experiences. But I'd love to hear. Oh, I see we've got Justin here too. He's a homeschool dad entrepreneur. He might have a thing or two to share. Let me invite him to speak. I'm just inviting everybody to speak. I think the main thing is, especially with a topic like this, if you come here to share Nobody's going to start judging you and telling you that you're wrong or that you're evil. Just be honest. Just be yourself and share your thoughts. Because if we can't do that, if we can't communicate, then we can't find truth. Um, okay. Like, toughen up, man. Let's. I think that the way that society seems to have pushed itself a bit, and this is Jonathan Haidt's work. If you want to look at Jonathan Haidt's work, he was discussing the coddling of the American mind and kind of some of these statistics. That's what I'm referencing here in particular. But the movement away from being able to have kids exposed to, dangers, not catastrophic dangers, but, just the kinds of things that they would have in the past. If you look at playgrounds from 100 years ago, I mean, wow. I mean, you would see slides that were 30 feet high with kids that were lined up on every single stair step on the way up. You'd see swings that were also 30 feet high, and you'd see kids that looked like they were 5, 6 years old, two of them at a time, swinging on one of these swings, and some of that is stupid. It shouldn't have happened. It's like some of these early roller coasters that, they're basically boxes with wheels and people died. It wasn't good, right? But at the same time, now we've kind of gone to another extreme where it seems like everywhere you go, there's just bubble wrapped everything because we're so worried that the kid might get hurt. And what does that mean? And why did that happen? And how much of that is just my perception because I'm a dude? Or, who knows? But I think it's an important conversation because you look at the representation of men in education, childhood education, and just parenting in general, it's really low. It's difficult to get an exact measure because I think a lot of the learning happens in ways that frankly aren't, they might be outside the curriculum. Just like my stories of my granddad and my dad. But yeah, go ahead, Dave. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm in line with your way of thinking. I notice one big problem that everybody has to now preface everything that they say. They have to say that I understand that people are individuals and there may be patterns, and we have to kind of discuss how there's different nuances and different personalities. And really, I think that's part of the difficulty is when it comes to parents who are teaching kids, there's not as much kind of black and white, and like you're talking about, whether it be adventure and hurting yourself, or whether it be gender identification. Parents are a lot more at sea and a bit kind of lost, and it's like, okay, I don't know what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do here. And I think there's a lot of external influences on that, and nearly kind of politeness by kind of paralysis by politeness, rather than like my preface is these are my opinions on my children, not on everybody's children, and not how somebody else should raise their children. But like, we shouldn't even have to preface that as parents. We should have to say we're coming from a place of direct experience with our children. It does not mean that our opinions have to be, prescriptive for somebody else. But I think you're kind of right when it comes to kids kind of hurting themselves, because I had an interesting conversation with my wife the other day. I was kind of playing rough and tumble with my kids, and she was just kind of laughing, and she was like, I'm seeing them nearly falling off the bed, nearly hitting their head, and she's gone, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, be careful. And
Yes,
and I'm
classic.
like, it's okay, it's okay. And what we realized is we were kind of discussing it later on in the day, and we just thought it was kind of funny how for us, again, we have to preface this, but for us, it's she thinks about here and now a lot of times. Are you happy now? Are you comfortable now? Are you safe now? And I feel like I think a lot about the future. And it's like, okay, like you said, fall down, hurt yourself, but you get back up. That's not for here and now. That's for the future. That's going to, okay, I'm going to make you more resilient. I'm going to help you get over things. And for me, a lot of, I realize a lot of conversations, a lot of even play with my children, how I'm kind of having education with them is a lot of future proofing. And I'm actually really glad that my wife has the here and now attitude as well, because I think if both of us were future proofing, um we would be constantly trying to mold and shape them. And for me, I have to sometimes like realize to just enjoy the here and now and look after their here and now moments as well. And I can't be in control of everything. One of the best things I ever done was have a second child, and for a selfish reason as well as the joys that they bring you is my two children are very, very different personality wise. And when I had one child, I thought it was all of my job to mold that personality. And when I had a second child, I realized that it's part of my job to help as best I can to do that. But there's a lot of pre-encoding in there, and there's a lot of themselves in there. They're not my minions to become what I want them to be. They are individuals that are encoded when they're born as well, and they're going to grow. Different experiences are going to affect them in different ways, and that really allowed me to take a step back and to not be as analytical and to not be as kind of if I say this, then it will influence this, and then it will affect them in 1 year or 10 years. It doesn't work like that. It's like, yeah, that's ideal world, but actually, the two children is like, okay, if I say this to him, he will act like this. If I say this to her, she will laugh at me. So there's very, very different processes in there as well. But I think letting children actually grow and be individuals and not having some sort of master plan, for me, the education is I'm trying to be me and be the best version of me through their eyes, not to just influence them and tell them what they need to do and how they need to change. Part of me running my own business these days is to show them they can do stuff. But a lot of that motivation, what I produce, what I do on say Twitter, newsletters, a lot of that is mundane to them right now. But for me, they're an influence behind that. How should you do something with credibility? How should you do something that you're proud of? So I'm trying to lead by example instead of being kind of, armchair parent and saying, this is what you should do.
Yeah, wow. I resonate with like every word you said. It's interesting because my wife and I, we never talked about gender roles. So she has a PhD. She's one of the toughest people I've ever met in my life. Um, and so just naturally, also both my kids are entrepreneurs. They make good money now at age 11 and 13 on their own, and they're really tough too. So in terms of, gender stereotypes, like it just wasn't something that was really happening around us. And so I didn't really think much of it um, until I was engaging a lot more on the education front, homeschool dad hat sometimes, and just realizing that, wow, there weren't a lot of people there. And then we got more interested. And then I did start to notice differences with my wife and I, where, well, I was the one that was like, let's get a bunch of blow up boats and find the nearest body of water and have an adventure. Like that wasn't her idea. I'm the one coming up with these ideas. But as we started to be aware of each other, that's when we were able to start playing each other's roles, like what you were talking about. And I just thought that was so cool when you were pointing that out about how, like, oh, the analytical side of, oh, but this will help for 5, 10 years. Oh, that was so me before, man. That was so me. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, and I do think what you described as the kind of the typical role of working dad and mom may be working or not working, but definitely has a lot more interaction and guidance for the children. I think there's a difficulty as well that men are a lot more or a lot less expressive and tend to, and I've done this in the past, tend to kind of express love through actions and through I will go off to war, I will go to the business war, I will work and I will not see the children. And I will sacrifice so that mom can see the children, everybody else can see the children. And I'm providing when actually that's kind of future thinking again, that's analytical thinking rather than here and now. The kids just want you now. Like last week I emptied my office, finished there. I've had an office for like 9 years, and essentially it just became a really expensive post box. But over the last while, I've realized that I love the interactions of my day, that it's not that 9 to 5 that I have to completely sacrifice and be away. I work at home, and my son comes home at like 11:30 a.m. and that's my first break. That's like come down, chat with him, sit down, see how his morning went. And it's really nice. And then my daughter's home at like, I think it's like 3 p.m. And same thing, it's that mental break and actually showing them this is how business is meant to be. This is how, charting your own destiny is meant to be. Not look at me upstairs stressed all day and I can't speak to you and don't disturb dad. It's like, no, look at the autonomy that he has compared to other people as well. I want them to see that. I don't want them to see that it's chasing money. It's like there's other things that they may pursue for that as well.
Yeah. Hey, Heather, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, well, I'm Heather. I'm a tech recruiter, so I'm kind of sourcing and listening at the same time. And Dave brought up, which he typically does in a lot of spaces, a lot of good points. And this particular topic, I'm a single parent, but for a while I had a male figure in my son's life, which he does have a dad that he goes to every other weekend. So, but I would say he hasn't played a heavy role in his education, where the person I was with for 8 years did play that role. So the topic itself, I was curious to hear a male's perspective, just because he's 14 now. So, I don't have a male figure in his life today other than his dad. And again, that's every other weekend. So I'm having to really think about myself as a mom and also making sure I still create some type of male environment for him. But I know it's not the same as having a male presence, just because he's not getting, kind of like what Dave said. I do more of the here and now versus the future, but I actually am very, I guess what I would say, masculine of a woman, in that, I'm more aggressive and assertive and all those things, but it's still not equivalent to what the male energy would provide to him. Or sometimes I might approach something with a more empathetic way, where a man might not have that approach. And it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just the gentle nature of a woman at times, and how we approach things. So just listening in. And then the other thing I wanted to say, Joe, is I think it's great to hear that your kids are in an entrepreneur space, because that's kind of where I think over the years is parenting, I think in all generations, is the future that our kids are growing into are not similar to what we were exposed to. So even like the adversity I had to, push through, my son is not experiencing that. So his adversity I'm not familiar with. So it's hard for me to create ways to get around those obstacles, because it's not what type of adversity I was met with. And we're both kind of in a sense of, what does the next 10 years look like with technology? And I'm still trying to figure out how to set myself up for that, and leveling up my skills to where the advancements do not make me obsolete, but I'm still able to maintain, a strong desire in regards to value exchange with compensation based on what skills will still be available to me that technology will not, not eliminate, but create an easy, and I know this is long-winded, sorry, but
No, keep going. In fact, I was about to invite you to come back on tomorrow and talk more about what you're doing, because that's fascinating. The role that you're in, the alignment with what we're doing on this podcast. Oh yeah, you can be co-host any day of the week.
Appreciate you. Well, so I'm just studying the inclusion of ChatGPT, and I was explaining to people that, it's going to create an ease of process. We're paid in direct proportion to the difficulty level of problems we solve most of the time, and skills in which we have. So if it's going to come in and eliminate some of our skills that have taken us years to equate, what skills does that have left to where we can still be compensated fairly, because we provide X value? And so that's kind of what I'm looking at. But in preparation for my son, I'm trying to help him understand, like, what's the best lane to go into, where the technology isn't going to cause him to have difficulty later in life to maintain and provide for his family. So even around the trade industry, like ChatGPT might tell a mechanic, what's wrong and how to fix it, but the mechanic still has to fix it. So I told him, like, you have to get at least a trade skill So you'll always have a way to make money because you're only as good as who you play against. So I'm focused on making sure my skills are advanced. Now, the advantage for him is I used to coach baseball and I'm actually very athletic. So playing any sport, I do decently at, but tennis is still one I'm learning to build in. But I was explaining to him that you get to decide your kid's starting point. So if you do not like the starting point that you were given, what I was able to provide for you, you get to decide based on the life you build for yourself what your kid's starting point is. So just always keep that in mind. So before you go to have kids, that where you grow yourself is going to be their starting point. And so because I do feel badly that and again, it's just how I feel. He loves his life and we talk about that, but he loves it because he doesn't know anything different. I know what his life could have been had I made different decisions early on. And so I'm 30, I'll be 35 this month and my son's 14. So I had him very young and I just didn't have any foundation built then. I've spent my time parenting, creating a foundation and we're there now. But now he realizes if I would have had him today, the life he would have had in 14 years from now would have been so much different than me having him at 20 and trying to I'm trying to fix what I should have done in my 20s and my 30s. And he just sees that I just tell him, you don't want to live your life kept always feeling like
And
you're
all
playing
those sort
catch
of
up.
friendships as well. But I can connect with both sides. And for me, um, I don't kind of worry about that part. You actually get a lot more benefit from that. And I would never ever look back with any regrets of I wish there was a male figure in my life. I would probably say when I look at all the male figures that I've encountered, they probably pale in comparison to my mother. And what you kind of talked about there really resonated with me about you going through struggles and then thinking about the difference in our children and stuff like that. And I've went through those struggles as well, and that made me grow up very quick and early. But my kids are on a different journey, and I'm not sweating about where they will go. I I've encountered some of the worst stuff in the world that you wouldn't wish on anybody else. But I'm still quite a positive person, and I'm still quite happy and grateful for my life. So it's not necessarily going to be avoiding those specific actions. I think it's more giving them the tools to deal with stuff, and that for me, even when it comes to my children, it's not specifically about school as a whole and curriculum. It's about creative thinking. It's about problem solving. I'm acutely aware that the jobs of today may not be available when my children finish school as well. It's the attitude I'm trying to instill in them. There's a problem. Okay, you just need to solve that. And how are we going to solve that step by step? And I think letting them have that kind of autonomy and having those small wins of whatever way they will actually solve these problems as well. And that's what my mother instilled in me. I had a conversation with her a few years ago because my wife is always laughing. My wife was quite introverted when we met, and I suppose I'd be somewhat of an extrovert introvert that I like connecting with people, but I also need a lot of time to recharge after I connect with people. Even on groups like this, I need downtime to me after this. But she asked me why my family had such confidence, and I never really realized we did. But I was discussing with my mother, and she said to me that it was acceptance. Whatever I done, she said, whether I emptied bins for a living or I was going to land on the moon, once whatever I done was something that I was happy with and I gave it my best effort, that was it. And that actually, I would have thought counteracting to that, it would have actually set the bar low. But the fact of I could do anything and there's still a safety net and there's still somebody there to cheering me on, regardless of what I do. My mother frequently tells me she's no idea what I do for a business, but she's extremely proud of the bravery of going out and starting your own business. And she could not imagine doing that. So for me, it's just having that person, that cheerleader. And I think, the empathetic side of it, that was a gift that I could not be more grateful for having.
Hardwired into me, especially after what we've been through, that I just don't really allow myself to think outside of that mental model anymore. But that also is one reason why I think dad should be more engaged. It's like, how much more do you need to be out there making more, pushing for that next step. I think it's part of the reason why a lot of dads haven't come back to the workforce ever since the pandemic. They were forced to be home. They were around their kids. They were with their family, and they started to realize that they were missing out on something. You know, it was kind of like this big moment for humanity where we could sit back and realize, have a breath to take, you know, before that midlife crisis to, you know, maybe course correct. Go ahead, Heather.
Get you through something else. And I think even when it comes to being on here and being concerned about the welfare of our children, that is enough for me. To have that intention, to have that want behind it, means that that's the type of parent you are. None of us have all the actual correct answers, but actually just having that intention to explore possibilities and to always want the best for your son, that's already setting him up to win. External factors like, you know, money and stuff like that are going to be somewhat out of our control. We can pursue stuff, but we may not have the same advantages. You may not have the same flexibility of time. We have to work with what we have. And for me, when I look back on memories of my childhood, I don't look back on anything significant that is connected to money. They're all really big milestones of when you actually know when the chips are down that somebody's there for you, when somebody is cheering you on, when somebody's proud of you. That for me is huge, and I think it's really important to remember that, you know, the money part. It'd be nice for everybody to have more money. It'd be nice for me to go tomorrow and buy a new house for my kids, but that's not going to stop the interactions with my kids, and it's not going to stop me showing my kids that I'm still pursuing something, and I still have that drive and want for them to have more. But I'm also kind of, like we said at the start, that sometimes we can step back and kind of be the soldier and have to, you know, get everything for them. I'm acutely aware of what I can give them right now. I can give them some of me. I can give them some of my love, some of my experiences. That's what I can give them all the time, regardless of if we have a nicer house or we don't have a nicer house.
Yeah, as somebody whose house just burned down 8 months ago and having lost all of our possessions, I think it was a reminder of something that my wife and I had been talking about ever since we met. She grew up in abject poverty,
Or
and
like being rude to him or making fun of him because he's a little, you know, he's not that way. And so I have to lean on my guy friend to kind of get a male's perspective, because I go into the approach like, well, what they say about you only hurts if you apply it to yourself. But at the same time, he needs to go in and be like, look, bro, you ain't going to talk to me like that. Like, you know, just kind of a different. So I am actually that way. I just don't parent that way. So it's weird. Like the woman I am, like I would approach it from the male side, but I actually don't parent in that way. I parent in a very motherly way. So anyways, this has all been very interesting.
yeah, well, it's tough. It's becoming increasingly challenging. And I assume your son's in public school.
Yes. And
Okay.
it's a small school too. So his class size, not just his classroom, but the total kids is like 40. So these kids have pretty much been together. It's K through 12. We live in a small town of 800. So we're doing a transfer to a larger school of like 11,000. I just think it's almost like siblings being together at this point, and that's where it's become like he can't, whoever he was in first grade, he can't change who he was in like there's no change of identity. So
Yeah, I
they're
know what you
always
mean.
going to associate with him based on who he was versus who he is.
Slowly with them and, you know, meet them where they are and help them get to the next stage, whatever that might be.
Conversation. Actually, that would make for another good topic for us to discuss, because there's some new people here, so I'll share a bit about this podcast. We're actually ripping all these recordings and putting them on YouTube as well. But this is the Global School podcast, and we're talking about the nature of education for those that are opting out of traditional education, and how they're essentially opting into this global school. And it's highly fragmented and not everybody engages with it. But for the educational, innovator, entrepreneurial type parent, they're the ones that are really trying to leverage this technology to create entirely new ways of learning for kids. And this is particularly powerful for high schoolers because, well, they're capable of doing real world things. Like both my daughters have published books on Kindle. Both of them have started multiple companies. Both of them teach kids how to build apps. And my younger daughter, she's 11, like on an hourly rate, if she worked full time, she'd be making over $100,000 a year. Now, like, how is that possible? Well, a lot of it's just this technology that didn't exist. Even 10 years ago, it would have been really hard. But pre-pandemic, it would have been hard because everybody, including our grandparents, were forced to learn how to use technologies like Zoom, right? So, there's so many different topics that we can talk about within that context because, we're talking about education. We're talking about building the future leaders of the world. And so we end up hitting a lot of different things, but this comes up a lot because for families that don't go to a public school, they tend to embody this concept called life school more, which is the power of learning from life experiences where you're never going to a place to learn. And so you end up kind of just seeing life as a learning opportunity as you go. And so the engagement can be quite natural. And so that's kind of how this topic came up, is that, dads were, more engaged on average, I'd say, by far, like way more engaged, frankly, with kids that were homeschooled, because the dads were often getting them engaged with their projects, for example. So that's just a little background for new people here, but happy to kick it over to Dave to keep this going.
Yeah, I think it's difficult with school because you have so many personalities that you don't choose to associate with, that you just get forced to associate with. And I think until you become an adult and then you actually have those conscious decisions. But Joe's right, there are life skills there to be learned as well. Even now when I'm 41, I'm still learning how to deal with people. I think starting my own business, there was a lot of being able to choose the people I associated with. There was probably a lot of influence on that as well because I'm quite like you, Heather, I'm quite direct when it comes to that, and I've had to even over maybe the last 5 years, I've had to learn how to be less direct because I realised the power and the impact that I have on other people as well. So I think like it's not kind of problems in isolation. It's rather, patterns and those small growths of, okay, is there a different approach? Just learning that creative thinking of, right, I can't deal with these guys this way. How do I deal with it? I can't go through the wall. How do I go around it, over it, under it, etc. But that's not just for those guys and that problem. And that's probably the most difficult part I find is when my daughter comes home and says, oh, well, this boy was being mean to her today. I'm like, okay, I'm going to murder him. That's it. And it's like, I have to stop and I have to think and assess. And I have to realize that I'm the safe haven just to vent all that stuff. I'm not always the person who has all of the answers either. I'm not the person who should be putting my approach onto them when they're only kids and don't have the life experience that I have. And would be completely different. If I was my daughter's age, I may have a different approach to deal with things that she dealt with stuff as well. So it has to be I'm much more kind of, okay, welcome back to the safe haven. Tell me whatever. And if you're looking for advice, we can have that. If you're looking to explore options, we can have that. If you're just looking to get it out of your system, that's fine. That's what home is. That's, for me, what parents are that safety net without any judgment, with acceptance, and can be there if you need the vent, but also can be there if you need advice. But I find that probably the most tricky part is my reaction is always normally, okay, well, we'll do A, B, and C. And I've had to kind of train myself to step back and say, okay, let me take all the information and what are they looking for from me rather than, and I think, for us, when you have different personalities dealing with your kids, it cuts us, I feel, a lot deeper than it cuts the kids. We're dwelling about this. Like me and my wife be like, okay, how did she get on today? Was that boy mean? And she's like, no, she was friends with him today. We're like, what? She was friends with him, but he was mean the other day. We hold those things a lot more, and we also build them up. And I think it's important to remember, as kids are growing and learning, and biology and hormones are changing, you're going to have extremes as well, that they're not necessarily going to be. If somebody said to you at 30 years of age, this is the worst thing ever, I know from experience what I thought was the worst thing ever when I was 14 is quite different to what I think is the worst thing ever now.
Oh yeah. There's like worst thing ever inflation that happens
Yeah,
throughout life.
and I'm not putting that down or trying to dilute the problem. I think that's important to kind of say, okay, well, that is the worst problem to them, to
Right.
listen to that. But for us, stress wise and how we actually approach it and deal with it, we have to kind of not magnify that and not kind of take it with our own perspective. We have to somewhat empathize with them.
Yeah. I'd like to I'd like to get a little bit more, well, I want to say edgy, maybe not. I mean, I don't really want to have
Do
a
it, Joe.
debate,
Do it.
but I think, we spent an hour kind of talking through and realizing that we're all at least able to have a conversation. I mean, how hard it is for somebody to come on that's like white and male and even have a space like this. Like it's challenging. And that's not to say that everybody doesn't have challenges. We all have challenges, but I was just recently, this is all so recent. Like if Sume ever wants to pop in here, I know she's sick, but we never talked about gender. It's just not very interesting to me because it's like what really matters is just the individual, and we're all so different. Like I will obsess about personality types, love languages, communication styles, different in ages and experiences and aptitudes and natural tendencies and like all of that stuff, cultural differences, who our parents were, the value structures, religions, philosophies, ideologies. Like these things to me are vastly, vastly more important. And yet there are some statistics and things that are going on that I recently watched a video on. It was by The Big Think, and I highly recommend it. I know Chris is good at this, pinning things. The Big Think is a YouTube video on like what's happening with men, and there are a few statistics in there that were quite startling. And I want to mention them, and then I want to hear thoughts about the impact that this has on families and kids. So one of these is that the United States is the only country that I'm aware of that has a falling life expectancy. I mean, I'm guessing that maybe Russia and Ukraine do too, but out of the entire developed world, we're the only one. Or no, I say we. This is a global school, but we live in the United States, and the main reason that's like pushing it over the line is basically like middle-aged and older men that are dying of painkillers and drug overdoses. And I mean, it's pretty bad. And then you look at like what these folks were saying. This is the same Big Think video that I can share later on Twitter. But, in surveys and psychologists that are looking at this, trying to figure out why, they're saying that they feel as though they're valueless, that they're not valued. And you look at the nature of kind of the types of jobs that have been shifting, right? The having the benefit of being bigger and having like larger upper body strength mattered a lot for like ever until now. Now it doesn't matter really at all. Like the number of jobs out there where it's helpful to be big is quite low. There's like football players and not much else, and so there's this shift, and a lot of what I see my daughters doing with their businesses is that they're so good with people. They don't have this tendency to try to become alpha male the way that men do. Like only 2 out of 5 men throughout history have had a baby. 4 out of 5 women have. And part of the reason why is that in order for a man to push his genes on into the future, he had to try to become the one on top, the alpha male kind of tendency, right? And so if that's the case, and that was certainly the case, I mean that's how we evolved. But then the labor market shifts over towards the need for more collaborative, more empathetic. Let's try to play by the rules. Let's try not to do anything stupid, and you're not going to win in trying to do anything that's more complicated, which everything is getting more complicated if you're not a team player and you're just trying to be the one on top, right? And that's been a struggle, and it's happening really, really fast. And as a result of that, that seems to be one of the drivers and shifts in the labor market that is making it more difficult for some men and leading to this higher level of essentially suicide. Yeah, I just think that this has implications for families, huge implications. Why are there so many single mothers, trying to do this on their own? Like, it's not right. It's a real problem. But please, Heather, I would love to hear your thoughts, and my apologies to anybody if anything came across as, me lacking perspective or what have you. I probably do. That's why I'm here trying to learn. So, but please jump in, anybody. But let's start with Heather. Male instincts of like tending to be a little bit more disruptive, tending to be the ones that might be the class clown more, or take more risks and things that don't necessarily fit into the mold. And you add that onto the stressors of schools, where increasingly so, because of the focus on school doing a lot more of the parenting, as we have more of the two income working families, and dads haven't necessarily stepped up the way that we would hope that they would, right? And so you have the schools being forced to do more of this parenting, but now that teacher is under pressure to try to keep and corral everybody. Well, part of the reason why, like almost everybody that's in prison are guys, but then you'll also see guys that are, spending almost all of their time waking every hour to try to pursue one thing. It's like guys tend to be more extreme on both ends and across many, many different dimensions. And so who's going to be the most disruptive person in the class? Like, who's going to be the one who doesn't fit the mold of the public education system and the Common Core and the, all this structure? Like, it's the guys that end up getting in more trouble. It's the guys that end up getting more detentions and more suspensions and yada, yada, yada. Right. And so, that's just, you look at the statistics and it's hard to argue with that reality. And then the guy's sitting there going, is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? And, almost every single school shooting is done by a guy. So to say that gender doesn't have any role to play in this, you can't do that. You can't really say that with a straight face unless you're just completely ignoring the data. Because it's not the girls that are shooting up their schools. And usually when the girls try to commit suicide, they don't succeed. The guys do. So if we're going to try to fix this, we definitely need guys to step up. Like, my opinion on guys and dads' role in education is that it should be more. And I'm not saying it should be less from the moms. I'm just saying it should be even more from the dads. Because it's like, how are we going to break some of these cycles? You got to do it the way Dave's mom did. Help him feel understood. Help him feel valued. Like, this is what they remember. They don't remember the money. They don't remember the financial struggles. They remember whether or not a person was willing to take the time to sit down and listen and have empathy. That is what I want to try to help do. I really want to help create a space for that for more dads, because I can pretty much do whatever I want for the rest of my life now. And this seems like one of the ways I can be helpful. But I'd love to get some direction, like critical feedback. Feel free to push back on me on it. I know this is tough stuff, but if we can't talk about it, it's not going to get better.
Oh, so you had me thinking, because, the one thing I've always pushed with my son, like, I've never, up to this point, he's never like told me no or like talked back to me. I kind of run a somewhat of a strict household, but I do allow a little flexibility around things. But it's just around cognitive understanding is how I chose to raise him. And everyone does things differently. I just always wanted to ask questions around his current cognitive level and then help him understand based on that level the rights, the wrongs, and the next step actions and things like that. So you had me thinking about, male and female, because I know the female body is full grown, I think by like 14, where the male body is in their 20s before they actually peak in that sense. And so I actually just did a quick look on the prefrontal cortex, which plays a big role in being able to forecast in future and just how, like, controlling your emotions and stuff like that. And a quick Google search states that the prefrontal cortex development plateaus later for males than females. So maybe that needs to be considered when raising a male, just kind of staying closer involved with them as the brain continues. I don't know. So you have me thinking more about that and making sure I prepare for that more long game with my son versus what I would probably do a short game with a daughter.
Well, is it any surprise? I mean, if a girl isn't basically developing her brain faster, that prefrontal cortex faster than men, then she'd be in big trouble. 90% of the time when a guy asks a girl out, he's rejected. 90% of the time that a girl asks a guy out, she's accepted. You look at there's what's that platform for dating? Sorry, I've been married 17 years. I'm very happy. So I haven't gone on this thing. Oh, Tinder. Well, Tinder's got really good data on how good people look because they can just measure you by swipes. So watch out, But they were showing that for women, that basically that's where that statistic is coming from. Is from this study where they can just show that only 5% of the time do women actually swipe left. I guess that means that they want to see the person. And for guys, it's like half the time. And it's funny because women they seem to worry so much more about their bodies and their looks than men. And yet the bottom 80% attractiveness, or the bottom 20% attractiveness for women, still gets invites to date from 80% of men. So it's like, if anybody should be worried about looking good, it's the guys. Because you got to be like really, really good looking in order to actually get swiped left. Anyway, separate aside, but go.
I know Dave has his hand up, but I just want to add this because you just reminded me of the Nora Vincent situation. It was a woman who wrote the book called Self-Made Man, and she decided to, I forget how long she acted as a man, but she ended up committing suicide or died by suicide because of how horrible men were treated and what that did to her psyche. So I don't know if you all know about that story and that situation, but it's interesting you bring that up just from me knowing about that book.
Wow. Yeah, and I'll be putting some of these links on the YouTube channel later too. But hey, Jean, you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself. Come on in here.
All right. Hello. I am Jean Bird, and I'll switch over my
Jean Bird
accounts eventually here. So I am a homeschooling mom of two awesome kids, and been kind of quietly sitting here listening and thinking about some things that you are all talking about. My husband travels quite a bit so that I can be home and homeschool the kids. It doesn't mean I'm not interested in working and earning some money, being able to do that. But the question is on my mind as well, as far as, is there enough interaction from their dad? Because he's not here as often as maybe some other dads, but maybe he's here just as often in terms of dads who work, right, and are not at home. Skipping a little bit forward, your community, Joe, that you're working so hard to create here has already had an impact in that area. Having homeschooled from almost the beginning, or from the beginning with a little bit of a gap in between, when we would go to park days and things, it was predominantly the moms in that space. And I like to pride myself a little bit in being willing to let the kids do sort of rough and tumble play and things like that. But as you saw yesterday, and I even noted it with the kids, in doing that video recording, there was a point when I was a little bit concerned about whether or not we were going to get attacked by a goose. And Joe's there, like, we'll just run away from the goose. And I'm like, well, I don't know. They're pretty fast. And Joe says, well, we're not even worried about that. Like, Joe was completely unconcerned by whether or not a goose was ever going to attack any of the kids. And so I had to sort of roll my mom self back up and go, okay, well, we'll be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And then simultaneously, my son is throwing himself on the ground and cutting his elbow open. And I'm like, well, I guess that's what boys do, right? I didn't go, oh my God, you didn't, be more careful. You've hurt yourself. I let that roll out. And the point I'm actually trying to make with this kind of example of what just happened yesterday is that because of the community, my kids had exposure to a homeschool dad who did some dad cool stuff and had a really great time. And I wasn't there directing the play. And so I think what is meaningful to me and seeing things move forward is the integration of homeschool dads in the community. And I guess it's just we're going through a period of switching over or incorporating something a little bit different than the homeschool community has been somewhat used to. It's not as if homeschool dads didn't exist, but they were so small in number that I think they almost may have been overpowered in some way, shape, or form by the mom think, right? So being open and broadening the community and having the play experiences with different sets of families and being together, I think is a benefit that is happening now. It's a changeover that's happening now that can be really powerful for offering our kids a way to develop more broadly than if we just were to stay within our little silos, our little homeschool groups, and do our little home, like, and by groups I mean like our little homeschool family and the other families that are exactly like us, and the moms who think exactly the same, and that's not, I don't think, good for growth for our kids in developing the sort of the grit, the tenacity, the rough and tumble play that can really lead to well-developed brains as they move forward in life. I think I'm kind of done. If anybody wants to jump in on that or just change.
Oh man, no, I'm happy to. Well, thank you so much for. First of all, your kids are an absolute joy. Jean was making reference to the community we're trying to build, and I mean, this is such a long story. I don't have time to share all of it. I mean, I've been sharing all of it. If you go on Google and you just type in the word Wequel, you will see a non-stop, borderline manic father trying desperately to find other people in the world that were seeing the potential of technology to revolutionize education in ways that just completely blew my mind, and that I didn't ever even think about until the pandemic hit and my 10-year-old daughter decided to start her own school without any teachers, grades, or a curriculum, and she was happier and learning 10 times faster than she'd ever learned before with her sister, with very little parental structure. It was just parental cheerleading, you know, just over Slack and Zoom and YouTube and just writing. And it was just so powerful. And I was like, there's got to be more people out there, because there were a few friends at first. It was the kids in public school that, well, so we had a little bit of background. We had like a rather privileged background. I mean, my kids had all the benefits, everything. Their mom's got a PhD. We're in Falls Church, Virginia. It's got the highest PhD per capita ratio of like any school district in the whole country. You know, we're in the same district as Thomas Jefferson High School, which is at least on paper, supposed to be the best high school in the country. So we moved out here and paid an extra $50,000 for our house for the school district. So when my kids were like, we don't want to go back, Dad, and they were making money. So it's like, you know, and not just like small amounts of money, like they were making material amounts of money. So it's like, yeah, you can pretty much do whatever you want. And then I found out homeschoolers can just give their kids high school diplomas. And I already told my kids, age 11 and 13, as soon as you want to graduate, fine, you got straight A's from me. You know, so one of the things Sume's building is a program in her app, Wequel app, to map all these thousands of projects that she's done to credit hours so that she can back up her high school diploma without having actually done any homework. It's like pretty remarkable stuff, but she just does that stuff. And, you know, it just transformed with, anyway, back to the community thing. I was looking at this and I'm thinking there's got to be other kids, because all of her classmates went back to school and they were a special kind of people. These were other kids that like went to Montessori when they were 2, had all these benefits, right? So I start writing on every single platform on LinkedIn and Facebook that had the word school in it, whether it was homeschool or unschool or virtual school, every single one that had at least 1,000 people in it. That's like 400 groups total, just so you know. And I would take these essays, writing about what we were doing, pasting them in all of them, and just sifting through thousands and thousands of comments. And I got everything under the sun. I got people telling me that I shouldn't be involved in education because I'm male. I had people that were telling me that they didn't want to talk to me because I wasn't Christian. I had, all this stuff. And almost never did I find somebody like Jean that just did it because she wanted to create a personalized, wholesome learning environment tailored to the unique strengths, interests, and passions of her kids. And she wasn't afraid. In fact, she wanted to communicate with other people in this global school around the world to get influence, to get feedback, to get community, to get insights, to share resources, to do group projects, something. She wasn't afraid of that. But the amount of effort that it took to actually find other parents like that has been a 3-year-long journey. So, Jean, I'm so glad you joined. And if you think you're excited about yesterday, man, we've been absolutely on cloud 9. I just put out a tweet, by the way, of Colin. That's her son, who did this like 60-second short, and it's amazing. You should check it out. But sorry that was really long, but that's the background story. He got 1,000 views in a day. I think he needs to come back with a follow-up.
Oh, he's ready.
So,
He's
yeah,
ready
you're
to do
legend.
it. He's got some ideas spinning in his head right now. Yeah.
There you go.
So
There
they're
you
here.
go, buddy.
So I'll just follow up by saying I encourage everyone out there in this community, other people that you might not even know yet, to integrate your groups. You can, and by that I literally mean dads go with moms and kind of bring it together, meet some people, and hang out, see what happens.
Do it.
It'll be pretty cool.
We're trying. It's trying. Well, you coming on and doing and sharing your perspective, that's huge. You and Nicole and some of these other moms, because I think it's just tough. I think that, and rightly so, you do have to be careful with guys. It's one of the things I talked to Simi about all the time when she was really, really young. I had her watching, her and her little sister, we were watching the movie Frozen every few months for a while. And I would quiz them at the end. I was like, and remember how quick that girl wanted to just get married to that guy? And they were like, yeah, Daddy, it took like a day. And I was like, yeah, and then what happened later? And they're like, yeah, he tried to kill her. I'm like, all right, remember that when you get older and go through puberty and stuff, start dating, okay? Just like hammering it home. Like, guys, you got to be, but you need a community. That's why you need a community. Everybody needs pushback. That's a big reason why I kept reaching out. I was just worried. I was worried that I was going to fail to see something. And entrepreneurs just do this instinctively. They have been trained from just forged by the fire of life, that if you don't open your eyes and talk to people, talk to your clients, talk to your core users, listen, that is the way that you will find the promised land. That is how you can solve problems.
Joe, can I bring up something about that?
Mind. Go for it, man. Sorry, I'm ranting now.
No, because I see with entrepreneurs, and I see with say if the dad is working, there's one difficulty that I see here is they are master of their domain. They're the expert in what they do work. They're not the expert when it comes to the parenting side of stuff. And I'm kind of thinking about this, how I think about anything. It's very much reframing the problems or the outcomes that we're looking at and going, why should I care? And what got me thinking was when you said dads need to do more, they need to do better. And I hear a lot of people say that. I don't hear a lot of people have positive affirmations that actually would help that would persuade dads to want to do more rather than negatively putting dads down and then saying, there are dads who do a lot who then go, oh yeah, dads need to do more. That's all I hear is dads need to do more. There's lots of dads who do lots of stuff, or there's lots of dads who are trying to do more. And the negative connotations of that for me, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm used to that kind of pushback like you are, and I can keep going. But not everybody's going to be like that. And because we have that kind of typical dads are less involved, and then they go to work where they're the expert, where everybody tells them they're great, where they've won this deal and convinced somebody on the sale or whatever it may be, well, they're going to want to go back there because it's full of dopamines, isn't it?
Oh,
Whereas, oh yeah, you should be doing more. You should be spending time. That's not, that for me is, yes, we know what the right
You're
thing
right.
is, but
It's
can we
not
not change
helpful.
the packaging to actually persuade, like we do in every day when we're convincing somebody to buy anything? Essentially, we're selling the idea of you should spend more time with your children. But when I hear dad should do more, I go, okay, on top of everything else.
So
That's
then
okay.
that's
So
not
so
the answer.
that's a kind of, I see a tilt and an imbalance, and then for dads, I see them hearing, okay, I'll add that onto my list of stuff that I already have as well.
As he's going to war, right?
Yeah,
He's
yeah. As
already on the front line.
he feels like he's doing what is right to the best of his capabilities, which may be wrong, but I think that's important as well. Is that it's if I came on here and said moms should do more, people would roast me.
And he didn't
Am
say,
I right?
when I do the edit, I'll edit the not out of that and get you in trouble. Just kidding. So this is part of like what was exciting for me and what Sume was doing. So if you throw the curriculum out and you engage kids in real world learning, man, did this come natural to me. I didn't really think that a lot of what they were doing before was real learning anyway, because there's a study that looked at like the top 20 best high schools in the country and retested their final exams 3 months after the fact. Average grade before was B plus, and then it was an F. And we've talked a lot just in the past. Can you guys believe it's been 2 weeks? We've been doing this pretty much every day. Well, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m.
I kind of feel like I know you guys a lot
for
longer than 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know, right? And I got to see Chris in person. We also do a meetup on Fridays. That's it. Well, it goes from 3 to 6, but more on that later. So where was I going with this? Oh man, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So Sume comes up with this new way of learning. Like there's no school, the lockdowns happened, and it was like, well, what are you going to do to learn? And she's like, well, Isla and I are going to come up with things that we can create. Like we're going to create something, and then we're going to show you. And it could be anything from like writing a creative story to building an app to taking a TED talk and then writing not a summary because that's boring and it's not helpful, but like their takeaways from it, or challenging certain ideas, or comedy videos like the one we did yesterday with Colin. This is a project, Jane. I don't know if you know, like I haven't really talked to you a lot about like their school and kind of the nature of like their style of project-based learning, but it's everything that they do is novel and useful. It's this digital resume of accomplishments that show on demand from anybody on the internet that wants to, proof of work, proof of competence, right? And so the backstory on this is that I was just glad that my kids were engaged. And when you don't have teachers, you really do need a feedback mechanism that can tell you how valuable this stuff is. And so she would be showcasing this stuff on YouTube, but like collaborating with other people and then getting the parents. That's when the parents would come in. Basically, she found a way to homeschool for the right kinds of kids, these more innovative families, where the parents can spend 5 hours a week instead of 30, and their kids can learn a lot faster and have a lot more fun. Because they would help figure out the plan on Monday, and then they would show up on Friday, and their kids would teach them about what they learned. The kids were teaching immediately. And it was just within like a year, Sume became this really powerful public speaker. And, she wasn't getting interviews then, but she was pretty soon. She started doing interviews, and that's when Google found what she was doing. And like, that's kind of the whole backstory. But it was like, what was going on with that? Well, it was very entrepreneurial, and it was something that I was very supportive of this, but it was harder for my wife to get her head wrapped around it. She grew up in the Chinese education system, where it was even more structured in the U.S. I mean, it was rote memorization from beginning to end, and that structure helped her break out of basically the countryside, where she wasn't even learning Shanghainese, let alone Mandarin. She just had to work her way through that and just like beat everybody along the way. So it saved her. That structure saved her. But if you're trying to prepare the kid for this work environment, this future, then those entrepreneurial, I'm not going to say male or female, I mean, that's not really the point, but the ability to go out and try new things and fail, pick yourself back up again and go at that. I mean, it's scary and it's hard. And if you're focused on the near term, like Dave was saying like an hour ago, I mean, if you're so focused on trying to avoid short-term emotional pain and struggle, then you are going to have a very difficult time raising a kid that is anti-fragile and able to just keep going and having those ideas and be unafraid to try new things. Because the average number of jobs that people go through now is 5 times more than it was 5 decades ago. And it's just going to keep going up. So if you don't know how to do that, you're in big trouble. We need a way to help these kids do that. And I think that dad's getting more involved in how. That's what we should talk about, is how.
I agree.
Sume, what we talked about on Friday was it, though. It was, how do you get kids more involved in their parents' work, in quotes? Like, what about side hustles? What about shared hobbies? Like this guy Ryan who came on. His son, 12-year-old son, netted $1 million on eBay last year. $1 million. Why? Because his dad was interested in eBay too. They were doing it together as a team. They're having fun with it each and every day. They're like buddies. They're pilot, co-pilot, And the kid's dyslexic. He can't even read. He's making more money than most anybody I've met. So it's like, there are opportunities to do that. Sume gave a presentation on it last week, actually. It was really, really good. Well, her and some of her students. But she gave all kinds of examples, really creative solutions, not men need to somehow find more time in the day. Same with women. Yeah, you don't want to tell anybody that. It's not helpful. I don't know. Hey, Sume, I don't know. Do you want to share a few of those by chance? Or I know you're sick, but you're just so good. She's probably asleep. No.
Yeah,
Hey.
sorry, I'm pretty sick.
All right. I'll try to remember some of them. I mean, it was one was interviews. So when I would have an interview, or my wife would have an interview, even though Sume was really young at the time, she might have been like 5, 6 years old, she could still sit in front of us while we practiced. And then she could, share some thoughts. Even if it wasn't like the, expert advice, it was still nice having a person in front of us to help prepare. So that was one. I also do surveys with them. Actually, usually they do this for themselves, but they would go around asking teenagers questions about what they were thinking. Isla, she's 11 now. She's asked maybe 30, 40 teenagers about what they like most and what they like least about high school. And because she just wanted to learn more about it. And I also wanted to, because, being in the ed tech space, so I'm an angel investor and backing ed tech entrepreneurs. And, that's really, really useful data, right? Well, that was just another creative way that I could be spending time with her while engaged with helping my career and helping her education all at the same time. So I think that it involves a lot of creativity. That's why you want to have a community of like-minded individuals that can share your values. And hopefully those values aren't, just trying to create echo chambers of people that tell you that you're right. If you can create the right kind of echo chamber of people that can help you see blind spots, that's a great echo chamber, because it's not an echo chamber. It's like the anti-echo chamber, right? It's like an anti-cult, It's like the tribe for the anti-tribe, right? Like that's basically what we're doing.